Maqbool Fida Hussain, an eminent, seminal, celebrated modern Indian artist, had won international acclaim in mid-1950s, consequent to 15 of his works being shown at Venice Biennale. Born at Pandharpur in 1915, he lost his mother when he was just 3 years old, and he was brought up by his paternal grandmother, who also passed away when he was 6. Hussain spent his childhood and adolescent years in three places, that is Indore, Sidhpur, and Baroda. In Sidhpur, he was put in charge of his maternal grandmother, who headed a religious sect, and from him he learnt calligraphy, which seemed to have attracted him due to its sophisticated artistry. In Baroda, he was under his uncle and he went to a madrasa. His uncle also wrote poems, and the poetic imagery held a special predilection for Hussain, to the extent that he also started writing under the pen name of Haya. In Indore with his father, he lived there for a considerable number of years. The cultural social atmosphere of Indore left a deep impress upon his sensibility, because the Maharaja of Indore celebrated all the religious festivals of the Hindus and Muslims, as there was a beautiful co-relationship existing between these two communities. It was especially the Taziyas in the month of Muharram, which marked the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, the grandson of Prophet, that seemed to have held a special fascination, being overwhelmed by the spectacle of the whole as the procession or the taziyas were taken down the streets. The two important elements of the taziyas were the horse or the duldul, which was being used by Imam Hussain for riding, and the other one is has the representation of an open palm or a panja that represents the 5 members of the Prophet family. The horse and the open hand became an integral part of his internalization of the visuals of these two in the procession, and it continued to appear also much later in his art. Hussain was always very much interested in art and painting, and he painted, and he also submitted one of his works where he won a gold medal. This gave him a confidence that he could become an artist, and so he joined a provincial art school in Indore, where he studied the skills and the techniques of various mediums. He studied there for 3 years, and he felt that he was now ready to join the JJ School of Art, which he did. He took his father's permission and he came to Bombay, but he had hardly joined and started his studies. He had to discontinue as his father called him back, as he had lost a job and he needed his help. But Hussein's heart was only in becoming an artist, and at the age of 17, he decided to break all family ties and he moved to Bombay. The early years he spent in Bombay was one of intense struggle, suffering, and poverty. He lived in a shack on Grand Road, which was a red light area and a grey underbelly of Bombay. He was fortunate enough to get a job as a hoarding painter for films, and he started painting these. His artistry and his dexterity in skills were such that he could paint freehand any of the great stars like the Shorab Modi without having to create the squares and then enlarge the design. These hoardings which he did were also very difficult in the manner he did it. He stood on a scaffolding with paints hanging from his 2 toes, the mouth holding the brush, and that is how he created these huge hoardings. But this left an indelible mark on his art, and the spontaneity that he created here in recreating these mega stars was to play an important role in his later works. Soon he got a full-time job and he joined a furniture shop, and they were manufacturing furniture for children. So he started a job here painting detailed decoration on the rocking horses as well as on many other toys, and that is how he maintained himself. With the full-time job, he nevertheless continued to paint at night, and he continued to show his paintings, particularly at the Bombay Art Society, where he finally won a gold medal in 1945. And this kind of brought him to the forefront as well as gave him the confidence. So he submitted his works every year at the Bombay Art Exhibition, and it was at one of these exhibitions that Souza noticed Hussein's work, particularly the potters, and he was equally charmed by the way Hussein recreated his compositions, his use of the elements of line and color, and the particular way he rendered it in his composition made Souza realize that here was a young artist who was on a different track and not led by academic naturalism that had become very popular with Bombay Art Society exhibitions. And it was Souza who invited Hussein to join the core group of Progressive Artists Group, and that is how Hussein became an important member and made his contribution. So in 1949, when the PAG held their first exhibition in Bombay, it was, of course, a spectacular success, and it brought Hussein to the forefront, and it gained popularity for all the 6 artists who had participated. While Souza, Bakre, and Raza decided to leave India and make their fortunes elsewhere, Hussein decided that he would travel. So between 1949 and 1955, Hussein traveled extensively, encountered various works of art of the art historical styles, as well as the works of the path-breaking avant-garde modernists, and and as a result of which he held a particular fascination for the works of Paul Klee and Vasily Kandinsky. Though Cubism attracted him, it was only the broken structure of the form that he would use in his works. Hussein in 1955 and 1956 created 2 important paintings, known as the Between the Spider and the Lamp, and the other one was known as Zameen. These 2 works are seminal in respect to the context of the time. Between the Spider and the Lamp was a mythical, imaginative, fictional work that Hussein had created, in which the relationship between the lamp and the spider was purely out of his imagination. But Zameen, on the other hand, was a very seminal work which declared his patriotism of the land, for a reason that when partition happened in 1947, Hussein was tempted to cross over and go to Pakistan. But then he decided against it, and he felt that he will deepen his roots in his own country and establish a name and an identity for himself. And that is how his patriotic zeal and his ardor for the country was established with this kind of thinking, and that gets reflected when he paints Zameen in 1956, in which he shows the village life with the farmer, the wheel, the bull, a pack of mules, the pregnant women, etc., all relating to the life in the village, and how that rural development was also to result in development of economy within the nation. Now, Hussein was equally inspired by, if he was inspired by the Western modernists, then he was equally inspired by many of the India's historical past traditions, especially the Basholi painting, of the Rajput miniature tradition. The line and the brilliant colors of Basholi made an impact on his sensibility. Of course, the folk art of the country also made an equal impact, and these 2 important traditions were to continue in his work in the way he developed his visual vocabulary and the resultant visual language. The repertoire of subject that Hussein created in his work as a prolific artist over the decades consisted of almost everything, in the sense that he made use of, or rather he engaged with the Ramayana and the Mahabharata epics, the folk tales, the folklores, and also the iconic political personalities like Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi or the social activists like Mother Teresa. All these works he created in his paintings. The motifs that he used, of course, varied. It was just not that he used all of these, but the motifs especially came from the Khajuraho erotic sculptures as well as from Mathura sculptures. And it is said that he went specially to Delhi to research the Indian miniatures and the Mathura sculptures. So that was the fascination that he held for Indian pictorial and plastic tradition, and which he had it extended even in his art. As far as his style is concerned, there were three elements that he made use of exhaustively, and that is line, color, and space. Line, besides being narrative and descriptive, carrying the burden of his emotions and feelings, was at the same time cryptic and synoptic, and it was laden with a nervous energy and tension that he brought to his works. So much so, his brilliance in handling the line was such that with just a few strokes, he could evoke an image of either Mother Teresa, or he could evoke an imagery of Mohandas Gandhi or any other epic form that he would derive from. As a result of these kind of influences, we find that Hussain uh, had an intuitive methodology of assembling and bringing together his own indigenous tradition along with the modernist Western tradition. So, a kind of quasi abstraction that is noticed in the works of Hussain is the result of this kind of assimilation. Now, for Hussain, any motive was not necessarily carrying certain, literary angle, or it was just fictional, or it was only symbolic and metaphoric. According to his state of mind when he was painting, or according to the environment he was in, he would change that particular motif. For example, the open hand or the panja of the tazia, which was so much internalized within him, appeared in many of his works. Of course, the open hand was the earliest representation of man in cave paintings, which shows the consciousness of his identity. Later on, he would use the same hand to show the reflection of the tazia and the mourning of the grandson of Prophet Muhammad. At the same time, it would also become a mudra under the influence of Bharatnatyam. So, in this way, one particular motif could take on various attire, various character, various form, depending upon his mental state and how he wants to use it at that particular moment. And it is this kind of a creative versatility, diversity, that he was able to bring to his works, which made his work so different and at the same time so Indian, in the way he combined the modern Westernist styles along with the indigenous tradition. He was just not a prolific painter, but at the same time, he also tried and experimented with many mediums. So, he was also a printmaker, he designed furniture, he was also a jewelry designer, also a filmmaker, and in this respect, he had his versatility and his creative genius expanded in various fields, and in each of these fields, he seems to have made a mark. Hussain, as we all know, was an artist who died in exile, unfortunately. That's because of certain images of the gods and goddesses, as he was inspired from the Khajuraho and the Mathura sculptures that he created. He created them nude. But there were many other examples of this type which had happened earlier. But this was politically motivated, and it was the result of this political motivation that his works were not accepted. They were considered as scandalous. And that is how he had to bear the cross of exile and die outside the country. An artist who had professed so much of love for his country by not settling anywhere ultimately paradoxically had to die outside the country. So Hussain, in that respect, tried his hand at a variety of subjects. He had created series on Mahabharata, on Ramayana, on Gandhiji, on Mother Teresa, on the cartographic map where he superimposed the form of a woman, sometimes naked, sometimes attired. And when it was naked, that is when he always drew suspicion and created a controversy. So, in this respect, every aspect of culture, just before his death, he was given a very important commission by Mrs. Usha Mittal, and that involved the entire culture, the entire history, the political history, the artistic history, which he was trying to render in those works. And it was left unfinished, unfortunately. And as an artist belonging to a different religion, that is the religion of Islam, he created many of the iconic Hindu goddesses. Particularly, he rendered Ganesha in a very endearing and in a very intimate manner. So, for Hussain, who had no barriers as far as religion was concerned, continued to paint because he was an artist at the core of his heart. And it was his committed passion, dedication, and love for his country and the environment that one finds very much related, and his contribution as an important, seminal, and a celebrated modern Indian